Kumlana Black Gemara. Today is Daf. Wednesday is Daf Chof Tes, and in the Mishnah, actually, we're up to the Chof Ches on the base on the bottom of the page. We'll start again for Rabbi Yehuda Eimet. Just to clarify, Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah that we said that if relatives, if let's say your son-in-law was your son-in-law, obviously you cannot testify on his behalf or vice versa. But what happens if, let's say, Chas v'Shalom, he's no longer your son-in-law, there's a divorce, or if, let's say she passes away, then it's a korev, then it's rachku, then you're no longer related to each other. Comes along, Rabbi Yehuda says, but if there were grandchildren involved, even though your daughter is no longer alive with a divorce, with the grandchildren involved, the grandchildren keep your son-in-law still connected, and you cannot testify. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, 6 lines from the bottom of the page. Amar Tanchum, Amar Tavla, Amar Rabroina, Tanchum says name Tavla, name Rabroina, Amar Rav, name Rav, Halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, that if there are grandchildren, even though the son-in-law is no longer married to your daughter, is considered your relative via your grandchildren. Rav Amar Rav Nachman, Rav is the name Rav Nachman, Ein halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda, halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda. It doesn't matter their grandchildren, since he's no longer married to your daughter, he is not considered your relative. Others say that this comment of Rabba Baba Chana regarding who the halacha is like, it was actually on a different din altogether. As it says in Pasuk, you should approach the Kohanim Halavim from the tribe of Levi, to the judges, that will be around in your time. And the obvious question is, what other judges would you approach? Who you think you go to a judge that was not around in your times. We mean that if this judge was once your relative, but now is no longer your relative, you can approach that judge. Omar Rabba says Rabba. Well, we look at the day that you're ready to go. It doesn't matter that yesterday this person was a relative of yours, but now that a person is no longer a relative of yours, you can go to that judge. So we're not only talking about witnesses, talking about judges as well. Now comes along Rabba Baba Chana in the name of Rabbi Yechon, said the halacha is like Rabbi Yesi Aglili, that even though the judge was related to you, no longer related, he can pass. The Gemara tells us an incident. B'nei, the children of Chamua de Marukva, the children, the sons of the father of Marukva, no, Marukva's brothers-in-law. Krevin v'nesrachku. He was married to their sister; they were relatives, but then she died. Therefore, he was no longer their brother, no longer related. But also the Kamei Din, they came before him for a dispute, and they wanted him to adjudicate. Amalu, he said, I am disqualified from judging you. Amrulay, they said, and obviously they were Tamil Chum, they said to him, my daitach, you why, what's your problem? You think that the Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda. You think Allah Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore, even though you're no longer married to our sister, but since with children, therefore, you're still considered married, and you still considered, like Rabbi Yehuda says, you're still considered connected to us. But Anan Masini Gartam in Marav will bring you a letter from Eretz Yisrael. There ain't Allah Rabbi Yehuda. You're no longer a relative. Why can't you adjudicate? Amalu, he said to them, Otu Bikava de Kida Idabakta Bechu. He says, you think we are like connected by a wax, like some bilga cord that we're connected? That's not what I meant at all. Not because we're related, nothing to do with Rabbi Yehuda. You know why I said I'm disqualified? You people are very difficult people, and you don't listen to a din Torah for a ruling unless it suits you, and therefore I don't want to get involved in the first place. And we learned right before the beginning in the Masechta that you can walk away from a din Torah if they're strong-hearted, strong people, before you actually get involved in the din Torah itself. Otherwise, it says you shouldn't be intimidated. Okay, it says there that then we had a mice about a friend, or we had a mice about an enemy, and we said that you're disqualified. What's the definition of a very close friend, and what's the definition of an enemy? And then the Gemara says, no, but we hold, we don't believe that people are actually going to give false testimony because of their emotions. Testimony has to be exactly what happened, it has to be the truth. So According to the view that says that friends are no good, become how long should a shusbin, somebody who helps you out at a wedding, a good friend at a wedding and helps you out, how long do we say that is disqualified from being your aid? The entire period of 7 days of Mishnah, the 7 of the Sheva Brachas, they're involved, they're close to a certain fondness, they can't be unbiased, according to this Tanakh. Just the first day and onwards is no problem, just a chasna. Hasayin, an enemy. We said what an enemy is. Definition of an enemy. Again, this is according to the view that says that you cannot trust them. We hold, however, you cannot suspect that Eden will in any way tell a non-truth. They will tell the truth regardless. But according to the one that says an enemy, what's the definition of an enemy? Someone, if you don't speak to each other for 3 days because are enemy to each other. Hasayin kosher loydib, if you didn't speak for 3 days. There's an obvious question. We had the Gemara for Machlekes Abaye and Allah like Abaye that even a mumma lahachis, when you're disqualified from being an aid, is not just because you're corruptible. Just because if you did an avera, even though you only rala shemaim, you ate treif, you only affected Hashem, you did it in spite. Nevertheless, you cannot testify because al tasha rasha aid. Any kind of a rasha shouldn't be an aid. Well, the Torah says you're not allowed to hate your brother. So if you're not allowed to hate another Jew, and this guy hates another Jew, that alone grounds that you can no longer be a witness. And so therefore, what's the relevance here? We hold there be no Jews, and we don't suspect you're going to change alter your testimony. Who cares if you will, you won't. The Torah says you shouldn't have a rasha aid. So we're talking about over here is that each one convinces themselves that this case, it's a mitzvah to hate the other person. He did some wrong, and therefore the Torah says you're allowed to hate the person if he did an aveda. So that's why they convince themselves as a mitzvah. And again, if you don't think you're doing an aveda, then you're not disqualified. Tell you right there. It says in the pasuk if he doesn't hate him. So the pasuk talks about if you kill someone by mistake, or you go to Syria refuge. So the pasuk says, when do we say that? You didn't hate him. So we dash now. He said so many times in the Torah. Why is you repeat again? So we learn from here. And then you can testify. So this the Tana uses to support himself to say that it only applies if you don't hate him. And so you didn't try to you didn't conspire to hurt that person. What's that pasuk against superfluous? You can judge. So you can be an aid, you can be judged, provided you don't hate that person. Here we find what that Osain is disqualified. I know that a friend is disqualified. This is how we dash him. You don't hate him. So we dash the word oyev is as if it says you don't love him either. So because again, it causes extra. Then you can be an aegis. You don't want to harm him, nor do you want to do him good. Then you qualify to be a judge. You can be a judge. What are you talking about? Midday oyev. See, where did the possible oyev an enemy, and you're turning it around and saying it as if it reads oyev his friend. Elasvoru, it makes sense. Oyev, my time. Why is it that we don't want an enemy to be your witness or judge? Because actually he has no time for you, and maybe he wants to distance himself from you, and he doesn't want to be involved in you. Is oyev nami mikabel. The problem with the friend is on the other way around. It's very fond of you, and who knows, you might change your testimony. You might be, as a judge, he might listen to you and think that you're right. But the Rabbanan say no. When it comes to edus, we don't suspect that you're going to alter your testimony. Since the pasuk is extra, we darshan before that we use it that you shouldn't be a witness if you hate him or love him. What do Rabbanan do with it? They hold it doesn't make a difference. You can still be a witness. So we had to chad l'dain. One is to tell you a judge. A judge, we grant you. A judge should not be a judge if there's a certain relationship between them. If it's too close of a friend or an enemy, we don't want them to be a judge. Because here you have to work in your mind and you have to decide who's right, and then you automatically have like a shaychat. Either what you do the other pasuk, the Mavakish Rasik, at a time he doesn't hate him and doesn't look for to harm him. Mekan l'shnei tamidei chachamim shesayin is as if you have two rabbis who have this animosity towards each other. She'ein yoshvin b'din ke'echad. They should not sit and judge together because you'll never really listen properly or thoroughly to what your colleague has to say, and therefore the justice won't be din emes la'mitay. Mishnah, now we're continuing the process. Kate said, the witnesses come in. Now we are going to check the witnesses to make sure that they're saying, correctly. We're not talking about, remember, there's no dish of a chakira. We don't do all the thorough investigations that we learn when it comes to commercial law, but still somewhat there is. So how do you check the Adam or interrogate the Adam? This is what you do. You bring them into the room, intimidate them. You tell everybody to leave. So there's no audience. There's nobody there when the witnesses say their testimony. And and they say, but the defendant and the plaintiff can be there. You leave the older witness in first. When we tell them, and we say, hey, how do you know that he's chayiv? Did you witness it yourself? There a hearsay. He told me, if he told me that shani chayiv, I owe him money. Each playing though, this other person told me, it's hearsay, even if the bar himself admitted to you, who knows why, if it really meant it or if it didn't mean it. Maybe it was just in jest, as we'll see in the Gemara later. It doesn't matter. Or as Rashi points out, as we'll see in the Gemara later, that not only maybe he just doesn't want people to think that he has a lot of money. He says, oh, I owe chayvus here, I owe chayvus there. I have so many chayvus. It shouldn't be, as Rashi says later on, we don't want an ayin hara. Why don't you want people to think you have money? So Rashi on Omid Bey says, we don't want an ayin hara. That's why. Unless these Adam say, the borrower called us in front of two of us. In other words, it seems clearly, we'll see more later exactly how it works. He appointed us to be his witnesses, and he was made. He owes them $200. Okay, they heard him out. The second guy in a boykin, I say, we sort of examine him as well. If the words are found to be similar, only then do we go ahead and we discuss it. It doesn't say because it seems that it says in the Shami, bring down. If both Eidim are mamish, like parroting each other, that in itself is grounds for suspicion. It's as if there was rehearsed. If they're a little bit different than each other, then it sounds real. And then we look at it closely, and if they're really more or less saying the same thing, even though the words are different, so if they found that their words are pretty much similar to each other, then then we take it seriously and we consider it. Two people say he's innocent, one says guilty, Zaka, he's innocent. Two people say guilty, Zaka, he's innocent. One guy says innocent, one guilty, but the third guy says, I don't know. Even if two people say he's innocent, so the third person is irrelevant. Even if the third person would have said innocent and these two people are guilty, he's guilty. Nevertheless, if two people say guilty, but one guy says, I don't know, we don't. If you don't say, okay, we have two, let's go ahead. We need to add the we need three, because actually we learned that a judgment has to come out in three. We had in the Gemara Machlekes with Kevin Tishpot or the other days, Psukim. But and the idea is that since you need three, even when the third one disagrees with the first two, it becomes, as Tyson explained, but in other places, it becomes as if all three actually paskin this way. And if all three, if the miyut is bottled, the rave becomes like the rave. So it's as if all three paskin that this person is guilty or innocent. But you need a bezin of three. Any day is not a bezin of three. They complete the matter. They'll call them in. So there is a dayan here that is superior to the other two, and yet we follow the majority. Because the Tais and Aaron, if you Gimel, it discusses what happens, the argument of Shama and Hill, and how come, Shama maintain their own opinion, because it's possible that Rameh actually passes the halacha. It's possible that if you have one judge that the quality is way superior than the other two, that even though if they rule against him, we follow the one judge. Here we see there's a godless Shibadayanin, is somewhat superior, and yet the Mishnah clearly says you follow the majority. And that's why we pass like Hill, because the majority, even though Shammai was considered Shaka. Each plaintiff is actually going to Chaim. You're guilty or innocent, and that's how we pass it. How do you know when you shouldn't say I'm the one who I tried to help you out, but what actually I was outnumbered. They're outnumbered me. It says it says another pasuk that only somebody who says Lashon Hara espouses what happens behind the closed doors. And as I just said to you, there is no longer an opinion that says innocent because it's as if all three paskin that this person is guilty. So think about it. Hey, I mean, what do we say? This is what they say when they want to intimidate the witnesses. They say to the witnesses, you should know about lying. The seam that clouds would wind of the Geshemayim. It looks like it'll be a rain, but there's no rain. Ish mishawel, and the person prides himself the mata sheker with false giving. In other words, you don't gain anything from it. It'll be a hunger. As if to say it'll be as a result of your lying, this was the impact it could be. It'll be a hunger, a famine, won't be rain. Amar Rabba, that doesn't scare them. Yachol, maybe they can convince themselves, delude themselves. Shev Shani have a kafna. There was a hunger for 7 years. But on the door of the tradesman, it didn't enter. We're not worried. That's not going to intimidate them. You know what you say? You know what you do say to them? Maf is the chedev, the stick and the sword, the chet shana and the shop, the arrow. Is what happens. There'll be a terrible plague. Ish check if somebody gives false testimony. Rashi, no, that doesn't seem them either. Yochanan can say, Shev Shani Havim, there was a big plague, there was a COVID around. Generally, young people didn't die. At least that's what they convince themselves. You know, it's not true. Elo Maravashi, Omali Nasr Mazuta's son Nasr told me, Amarina, we tell them, you think that you're going to gain anything by this? Even the very people who hired you to give false testimony don't look down upon you with scorn. I mean, Sadi Shaki, that false witnesses, even those people who hired you, they look at you with scorn and derision. To see, we find that they came to they wanted to grieve the Achav to have the field of Novus HaYisraeli, so they advised the king. They said, go ahead and appoint 2 witnesses, liars, evil people, Negdoi against him, and you'll see V'yodul and Limelemer, they will testify the following. Birchas Elikim, Berachta Elikim v'melech, that you cursed out Hashem and the king. So they themselves called these 2 false witnesses of Bnei Belial evil people. So they hold them in derision and contempt. So what's the point? For a few dollars, so what about your reputation? Says the Gemara, if he says an individual person told me, actually, you have to say before both of us, if to say to a witness, is that enough? Just the fact that we're 2 people there and he told us in front of both of us, that makes us witnesses. Shuchai the Messiah is $200. Says the Gemara, Messiah, let's support the if you have 2 people saying that doesn't make the witnesses until the borrower says to them, I want you to be here and listen because you are going to be my witnesses. Sorry. So it says the following day, Omar lo, he said continually, give it to me. Omar, he said, I was just playing around with you, toying with you, potty. No, I was humoring you, as Tracer explained. Since somebody came to him, the Gemara says generally, we'll see in the Gemara on the base in a minute, there are 2 different responses he can give. He said, look, I was just playing around with you, I was humoring you. And the other one is, I didn't want people to think I'm rich, so I was happy to say that I owe people money, so it shouldn't be an Ein Hara. And the difference is, as the Rishonim say, and Tracy sort of alludes to it on the base, if somebody came along and asked me for $100, he said, you owe me $100. And I said, I made $100. Later on, I said that because I don't want people to think that I'm rich. That doesn't make sense. The guy claimed to me $100, and if you didn't owe the money, you had to deny it. By admitting it, you admit it. The only argument you can have is, it's such a preposterous thing. I never borrowed money from you. After such an outrageous claim, I just tried to humor you. I owe you $100. That's the argument. But where no one comes to claim for me. So what do I go around making jokes that I owe people money? Then the reason why I go around saying I owe people money is because I don't want people to think that I'm rich. As we'll see, the time we learn money, money. I'm like, hey, yes, I'm going to give it to me. I'm like, I was just playing around with you. I was humoring you, potter. Because there's no aegis, there's no bez or anything else. You just came out with me with an outrageous claim. So I just said, okay, I'll play along. You hid Aiden behind the fence. Would you be willing to testify before this person or that person? I'm scared to because tomorrow you pull me to the best and try to take money. I don't have the money. So it's as if he's really made it. In that, I'm even prepared to to be made in front of Aiden. I just don't want to because I don't have the means to pay you. And there were 2 Aiden behind the fence. Still not good enough. I'm going to give me. I was testing Potter. Then the Gemara says the ain toyanin lemesis. But we do not support, we do not advocate on behalf of a mason. What's a mason? A mason is somebody who induces others and convinces others to go ahead and to worship Avodah Zarah. That's called the masons. The Torah tells us not Rachmanis, we don't help them out. Says the masons, man de kashmeh. How does it come into the formula here? Where does the masons come in? We're talking about money. I owe you $100. Says you're right. A few words of missing. This is what you said. Even like if this person did not say, I was jesting you, if he said, I owe $100, and the guy came to the next day and said, hey, you admitted you owe me $100, give me $100. If he doesn't argue, I was playing around with you, then he has to pay. That's an admission. Ain't telling like we're not going to advocate on his behalf. Or the din of fasher because the matter of life and death. I've got like even though he didn't tie it, like we are going to advocate on his behalf. When it comes to din of fasher, if something happened, if there's any way, any angle that we can defend this accused, we would. But they ain't trying to maces. When it comes to a maces, when it comes to who's the din is that we put to death, we are not going to advocate for him at all. Why not? Maishla Mesa, why should we do it? The Pirkei Rabchia, Barabba Shemil, I heard. Shiny Mesas, Rachmano, Torah says, Loi Sachma V'Leschasulav. You should have any pity or compassion and don't cover for him. From the original snake, from the snake by the story of Adam Chab. He could have argued many tainas, even though the Morgue is only one example. But and he didn't claim. Why didn't we advocate on behalf of the Nachos instead of punishing him? Who? Because he didn't taina. My Havel remember, give an example. What could he have said? He could have said the famous word, Divrei Harab, the Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishayim. Tell me, if your rabbi tells you to do something, your master do something, and a student tells you, who should listen to your master? Divrei Harab Shayim. So I never expect you to listen to me. I never expect you to listen to me. Tracer says over here, interesting. Tracer says that so every single Mason can use this argument. The Tracer says an interesting thing. But it comes to a Yid after Matan Torah. The Easter of Masons of convincing someone to worship idols is not if I was successful, that's irrelevant. The very fact that I tried to convince you, even if I'm a family member, I have to be put to death. Prior to Matan Torah, there's no Aveda. So there's no Aveda of trying to induce someone. It's only if there was an outcome. If there was an outcome, so therefore the Nochash can have a taina. The fact they try to convince you is not an Aveda. It's only because you worship Avodah Zarah. So then, what do you come to me? You didn't Aveda. What do you come to me for? You should listen to the There is an obvious question here. What does the Nachash have to do with Mesis? Mesis is only Avodah Zarah, as Rashi says right here. The Nachash convinced them to eat from the Eitz Hadas. Live a long way, live forever. What does it do with Avodah Zarah? Unless because he said to her, you will be, Hashem doesn't want you to eat from the Eitz Hadas because you'll be like a God, you'll be like a Makim. That's as if he's a Mesis, as if denying him, as if denying it. Others say the reason why a Mason, every Mason does not have the argument because this is different than any other Aveda. Stealing, I can say, I never expect you to steal on my behalf. I thought you listen to Hashem. But the whole idea of a Mason is you're saying to the person, there is no Hashem. You're saying there's, being an idol worshiper. You're saying there's no Rab. So how can you say you thought the guy will listen to the Rab? And you yourself told him there is no Rab, which is very different than all other Avedas. Anyway, the Gemara continues. How do you call if anybody adds something? Actually diminishes. Shenemar says Chava told the Nachash that Hashem said, Hashem said, Lo yisoichlu mimenu, you shouldn't eat, v'lo yisigaba, you shouldn't touch it. She added, Hashem said you shouldn't touch it. So when the Nachash pushed against the tree and nothing happened, she thought she'll get killed straight away. And nothing happened, she therefore ate as well. So by adding, she made it worse. Now this is very interesting because in Avos the Rab Nosson, in the very beginning of Pigi Abba, where it says Asus Yagla Torah, Abba Nosson says it was actually Adam Harishon who decided to add that line to Chava. Chava was sort of innocent. Adam was the one who added a line, and it was sort of Adam's fault. But Chava thought they not only not allowed to touch, you're not allowed to eat it, you're not allowed to touch it either. But our Gemara clearly says here that she did it. That's why you light candles on Friday to Chapa that sin of Chava, when in fact, because at the end of the day, Chava gave Adam to eat from it. But according to Adam Nosson, it was ultimately Adam's fault. Now, how you know that if you add, you're actually diminishing from here. Amosayim b'chetzi orkod. If Aaron is 2.5 amos long, so Rashi learns if you take off the aleph, if it would have said only a Masayim is 200, so it would have been 200.5 amos long. But by adding an aleph, Amosayim, it became only 2 amas. Others say it's the vav. If it would have said amasayim chetzi or that 2 amas is half of the length, it would be 4 amas. But by saying amasayim vir, adding a vav, suddenly is 2.5 amas. The Rashi from here says ashte eseri. You should have 11 different curtains there stitched up stitched together by the Mishkan. If you take away the ayin, it reads shtei eseri 12. By adding the ayin, it becomes 11. Amar Abaye, it says Abaye, Lo Shanu. When do we say this din here? That what? That he doesn't have to pay, even though he's made to people and to him and was hiding behind the fence. He's playing around with you, humoring you. But if he actually says, he doesn't say that. If he says something else, if he says lahadam, he says lahidvar, it never happens. It was a kafir, a liar because he paid it was made. So therefore, then he would have to pay. Come look at Papa Bereder Racha Barada. Hachi Amrinan Mashmeid Rabba. This is what they say name of Rabba. Kol mili interesting. Kol mili d'chdi. Anything which has no real significance, just trivial things which is not important. Like the kiddush, people don't remember. Things that you hear yesterday, whatever it is, if it's not an important thing, you forget pretty quickly. And if I definitely forget things very quickly, but it says if it's not important, people generally don't remember. Thinking about a few examples of where he admitted something, but we don't accept that admission. He actually hid witnesses. He hid witnesses over there by the bed, by the I guess the screen over the bed, so he couldn't see him. And Amalei said to him. And meanwhile, the lender's talking to the borrower. He said to him, $100. Yes, it's true. The borrower said yes. Now the witnesses were hiding behind the curtain. They couldn't even see it by the bed. Then he said to him, he sort of hinted, Edie, he said, what about all those who are up, b'shachvir, asleep, lehevi al should be witnesses. And the guy, the only 2 people in the room are us two. So he hoped that the guy would say yes. And then it's as if he pointed those 2 people hiding behind the curtain to be witnesses. But the guy said no. What do you want? The guy said no. In fact, why is he going to say that? We'll soon see. I mean, what's the point of the story? Obviously, if he said no, there's no. We'll see. He once hid witnesses by a Beis HaKvaris for his friend. Amalei said, actually, in Shulchan Aruch and Eben Ezer of Zayin, I think the Rashba talks about where witnesses were behind the fence, and they heard the man say to the woman, "Harei at mekudeshus, you're engaged to me," and then they saw her walk off with a ring on her finger, but they didn't actually see the event. Are they considered witnesses? But here we're talking about hearing, not seeing, but hearing. And they were hiding in the cemetery. The Malva said to the Leiva, yes. He said, well, all the living, which is basically meaning you, and all the dead, which which really what he was alluding to, there were 2 people alive there in the base of Goddess. No, I don't want. He said, no, what do you want? So Ravina said, other than Papa said, Shmamin of Maho, from here. This was Rabbi Yehuda's name of Rab. That you have to say, you are my witnesses. It makes no difference. Ki makes no difference if the borrower said to these 2 people, be my witnesses. Obviously, then they are. But even if the lender said to 2 people in front of the borrower, these are my witnesses, and the borrower didn't say a word, they're considered witnesses. That's a big finish. How do we know that? Because the only reason why in these 2 cases there are no witnesses because the borrower said no. Abeli Shazim would have been quiet. There would have been 2 witnesses. Achinami would have been 2 witnesses. So it doesn't matter if even if the Mal was the one that said be witnesses, good enough. There was a person going around with a name. He had a nickname. He has a mountain of Saibis, a kav, a measure, Russia of all these contracts that he owes money. And he's very happy to have this rumor bounding about him. And then he went and said, well, he tried to say, look, not the whole world I owe money. I only have money plainly 2 people, this guy and that guy. Also, so what happened was, these 2 people go, we owe us money. You said so. Give us the money. They went to Rabbi Nachman. Adam also, it's common for a person to say to others, I'm poor, I owe money to everybody. That he shouldn't give himself too much. And as Ashi says right here, why? He doesn't want to have an ayin hara. He doesn't want people to walk around and say, oh, this guy's rich. It was a person that had a nickname. He was a mouse that sleeps on gold coins. What a mouse has absolutely no appreciation, no benefit from the gold coins. This guy is such a miser that he has no benefit from all his money. When he was dying, Omar, he said, Planya, Maskabi Zuzi. He said, these two people lent me money, I owe them money. Now we just said before that when remember he did it on his own. You can't say I'm humoring anybody because nobody came to claim for you. You went, you did it on your own. So when you're alive, we say you're saying it. You're propagating this idea that you owe money to people, so that people should give you nine horror. But here you're dying, and we know generally the person's dying. He's truthful. What about in this case? Does he pass on? He doesn't want people to go around giving nine horror to his children as well, and that's why he's saying that, or he actually meant it this time. So Moshe Rabbi died. Also, to be in the ocean. So these two people came along to the ocean. Well, your father admitted on his deathbed he owes his money. We don't remember, but he admitted it. Also, the Kamil Bishop Rabbi Yossi, what's Rabbi Yossi? Amalei said, "Ki amni no Moshe lesbians atzmai." When do we say that a person goes around saying, "I don't have too much money"? Hani mil b'chaim when he's alive. Allah Hamisa, but once he's dead, loy no. So what happened was they didn't have enough money on them. So Paru Palga, they only paid half of what they owed. So what happened was to Viladina Lida Palga. A while later they came and these two people came to give us the other half. This time, also the Kamen Abchir. Amalu, he said to them, he said, no, the same thing applies. If a person doesn't want to have an ein hara for himself, he doesn't go around saying, I have so much money. Kach od, it shouldn't be ostentatious, as the Klei Yoker says by Shishi in Pashat Dvarim. That when it says Penulach and Tzvayna go to the north, when they were traveling, Rosh Hashanah was saying Tzvayna means to hide, be discreet. You have to learn not to be ostentatious. You don't want ein horis. Or he talks more about that. You don't want to create anti-Semitism. So too, in jealousy and envy. Adam Asir Shalayla has as anab. A person should not give too much to his children. You say the question is how could a Priya Pascha different on the Bezdin? Because it was like a new din Torah, because they went to and they only paid half, and now they went to another Bezdin, as if it was a new din Torah. Therefore, it's like reopening the case. So he was allowed to make up psak. But on the other hand, he didn't want to overturn the previous psak. So whatever they did, they did. So they said, well, give us back our money. So we paid you half. Zakin already paskin. Interesting. We use the exact same expression. Rebbe used the exact same expression before on his father, Rabbi Yossi. And now we're using it on Shmuel, but Rabbi Yossi as well. Once he ruled, we don't want to overturn what his ruling. We also have a concept we had in Babas and Florpedic, it's elusive the Beidina. We don't want in any way to cheapen the whole idea of a business, institution of business. So we have an idea, there's two kinds of loans, an oral loan and a written loan. An oral loan, you still owe me the money, but you don't have to pay me back in front of witnesses, you can pay me back. But a written loan, an ashtar, you have to pay me back with witnesses, or at least collect the shtar from me. If I still have the shtar, retain the shtar by me, nobody's going to believe that you paid me. Number one. Number two is I have a shtar. I can collect. If you don't have the money, I can collect from the lekuchas. I have a shivit, I have a lien on the properties that you sold after the loan. But if it's an oral, I cannot collect my lekuchas. So what happened was, the question is, when do I have to explicitly tell you to write it down? If I went out of my way to get two witnesses, does it automatically mean that they can write it down on the shtar? And because in a way, it adversely affects the borrower. Or does the borrower specifically has to say, write a shtar, prepare to grant a shtar to the lender? So the Gemara says, definitely you have no right to write a shtar. But he made a kinyan. He made a kinyan for this loan. In that case, even though he didn't expressly say, I want you to document and write a shtar, he's question to write a shtar. A shtar, he said, I owe you $100. He said, I owe the lender $100. And now it's a shtar, a proper shtar that the lender can collect from any lekuchos beyond his date and so on. And you can no longer tiny you paid it back. If you didn't make a kinyan, then you don't write it down. Even if he told you two people, I want you to be Adim, because all I want you to be is Adim for the loan. That's it. But for three people, that's like a bezin. But like Konamiyad, they make Kenyan Rab on Markaisin. Why? Because since they're a bezin, and because they're a bezin has the koyach to make everything hefker, they could automatically take a loan that's oral and turn it into a written loan, a documented loan. And the Rashi says, ain't kaisin, you don't write. Hayub, there was a story, the Choshle Rab, Lahad Rab Asi, and Rab actually followed Rasi's view that, well, even though three people there, they did not record it, did not turn it into a middle of Ishtar. Why? Because maybe even though there would have been two people there, he would have still done the same thing, and it didn't happen to be three people there. Doesn't automatically turn them into a bezin. Said the Gemara, Sometimes this admission, this document, sometimes even the Kasvin, sometimes we do write it, sometimes we don't write it. Go to fast. Knifi, the Yasri, if they happen to be sitting together, three people, then look doesn't mean anything. Maybe it would have been two people, still would have made the same admission. Or the Kanfinu Iyub, but if he gathered three people together, why is it gathering three? Obviously, he wanted them to be present. So even though he didn't expressly tell them, write a document in the Shtar, good enough. Kasfinu, we write it. Rava says, Afilu Kasfinu, even if he personally gathered them, you don't write it. Ad Amalu having that has to explicitly say, you are a bezin. But Rashi goes a step further. If you said you're my bezin, like Kasfim, going to write it ad the Kogli Duchte until he sets up a place. And they send him a subpoena, a summons, and they send him a summons, and that therefore turns it into a proper bezin. Then we say, okay, write the start. Then they want to continue. If somebody was made when it came to Metalkli, and he says, yes, I owe this money to this person, as we said before, and the economy of the, and you made a kinyan, then you're right. Yes. You're right, and if not, if he didn't make a kinyan, ain't kosher. You don't write it. What about the Mekarka? What about Karka? When it comes to Karka, do you still have to make a kinyan or not? For example, there was Karka that somebody, Reuben, was holding on to, and then Shimon said, you know what, this is your Karka. How do we view that? The Karka, well, the economy, didn't make a kinyan, but I said, this is yours, mine. What happens then? Do you write it down or not? Look, he didn't tell them, he didn't make a kinyan, you don't write it down. But Marzut says, yes, you write it down. Why? The moment he was minded that this property belongs to Shimon, there's nothing to do. Property doesn't move around. So the moment I said, I'm not really the owner, but Shimon's the owner, then it's Shimon's. And it's not mechzer gevainde, there's nothing for Shimon to do to collect it. When it comes to metalklin, people have a right to spend the money. And therefore, I have a debt to you, not the money, I have a debt to you. And therefore, we cannot switch a milva alpeh, an oral debt, into a milva v'shtar, unless you make a kinyan. But karka is different. The hilch of the halach is koisrin. The halach is by property, you write it down as soon as I admit that it's not my property. So continue to write to learn to rule about these dinim. Okay, so we said before that if you made it from two eidim, a metalkling, and you make a kinyan, then you write the star down, and you don't even have to ask the Malva, do you want to start? Of course the Malva wants to start. So you can write it down. Talking about it further, Ravina once came to the city of Dimharya. What happens with Talkling? But the Eastern Benayo, the money I have available in my hand. I didn't make a kinyan. You just said about Karka, since the Karka is here, doesn't have to move anywhere. As soon as I admit this Karka belongs to somebody else, it comes out of the person. What about Metalkin? I'm that this money belongs actually, I owe it to somebody, not belong, I owe it to somebody. What's it then? Do we say because the money is sitting here present as if I already gave it to him? Or do we say, since I have a right to spend the money, I can still spend it right now? And therefore, it's not considered I gave it to other person until actually I give it to him physically. And being made in front of two people doesn't mean it comes automatically start. He says like property. Since you still have to collect it, all it is a debt right now, doesn't matter the money sitting here. In fact, we have beginning of Rashi that if the money if I still have the original money you gave me, not other money to supplant it. You gave the original money, but I didn't spend it yet. Do we still treat it as if it belongs to the Malva, or do we say the moment I had it in my pocket, because I had the right to spend it, even though I didn't, it's my money already? Talking about it further, so there was this admission, there was a document where there was an admission, I owe money, and the two wouldn't sign on it. There was two inside of it. And he didn't say the normal words where it would say the two witnesses say Lonu, that he told us Kislu and Kislu B'Havle. He doesn't say he told us to write it and sign it and give it. And is Abaye the Rav they both say Hainu Rish Lakish. In other words, it's an incomplete start. Do we automatically assume it was done properly? They just forgot to write it, or we say it was done wrong? This is Shloki, famous Shloki, Chazaka, we have a ruling, Aiden will not sign on the star, unless the person was 20 years old, because we know when it comes to selling property, you have to be 20 years old. Even though it doesn't say in the star the guy was 20 years old, we'll assume that Aiden would not have signed unless he did it correctly. And so on. So the same thing here. Since even though we don't know if the guy admitted in front of them, said you're my agent and so on and so forth. Of course, they wrote it, probably did everything correctly. Ask about puppy. Puppy asked the question. We came who never sure. And so what others say, I'm never sure. We had this already in other places. And the Babasa. Is there other things that non-lawyer didn't? We ourselves are not even so familiar with these laws. And the Safra, the Medina Yodi, and the Sofrim of Bezin, they know these laws. They know that the agent are incomplete, that it has to be done properly, and so on. That the agent has to be told that you're my agent, and be told to write. Be told to write a shtar or not. Shalin Safra the Bayevi, they knew. Safra the Rabbi, they knew. I hear this, and there was this document of admission that the Kosovo is written there, but the text was written as if it was written by a bezin, not the normal text you write witnesses, but it doesn't say anyway that we were 3 dayanim in a bezin. Have a Kosovo is written, we want to remember the following words. The entire text was written as if it was written by a bezin. The Kosovo does not say the usual opening, but Moisa plus Avinu was front of the people. The Chad L'Saya, one of them did make it to the end. We had them in Ksuba, the Chabez and Bez. If you start out with 3 and then there were 2, what happens? Because then you normally have to write, we start out with 3 and end with 2. Somebody in the thought, again, nobody would have done the wrong thing, and therefore definitely was done the right way. And therefore we can rely on it. Rabbi says no. In this case, we are concerned that it could very well be that they made a mistake. That 2 dayanim, we don't know the experts, made a mistake. They thought that 2 can rule. But if it were written there, the word bezdin, everyone knows a bezdin is 3. So you don't have to. Fred the Gemara that what called the Dilla Bezdin Chatzah. Well, even the word Bezdin doesn't mean anything because we learned before the Shmuel holds you can have 2 people, but the evidence is good because just a chutzpah to get Bezdin. So therefore, maybe Taka there were only 2 people there, the Bezdin Chatzah. So why rely that it's good? Amar Shmuel Shnaim Shadon the name didn't. Ella should get Bezdin Chatzah. So we say, when you can line it, the Kosabay, it says there, Bei Dina de Ravonashi. This is the Bezdin around near Ravashi. Says the Gemara doesn't do anything. The Duma Rabban Ravashi Kishmul Filu. Maybe the Halak Shmul, the Kosabay, it's a Halak Shmul, that even 2 are sufficient to be judges. So the Gemara, the Kosabay says there, Vamarna Leil Rabban Ashi, or Vamalon Rabban Ashi. Rabban Ashi told us to write this down. Rav Ashi himself would have written it down. And Rav Ashi was the one, as Ashi points out here, he hasn't gone upstairs to the playground. Rav Ashi and Avina both concluded the Gemara, and therefore Rav Ashi would have told us exactly what to do. And they want to say that the Ravina came from Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, just like when Mishnais is finished, Nosna Babli joined the Rebbe, so you had the 2 different learnings together, and between the 2 of them they composed the Gemara. The Mishnais, so too, Ravina Ravashi, Ravina came from Yisrael, so he knew the style of learning from Yisrael. And you had Ravashi from Babel, and they together made the Gemara, and that's why the halacha is like Talmud Babli, because they have best of both yeshivas, of both taitas. Stop here. Continue with tomorrow.